Welcome to part 2 of Fist Logic, Chandra's origin story. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the first part, click on the card or go to the channel and find it. But if you have listened to it, then settle in for the second part of this story. Chandra took a series of turns through the streets, leaving the consul's soldiers and a tangle of bewildering emotions behind her. She kept glancing down at her hands, but they appeared to be nothing but hands now. There was no sign of the self-immolating craziness from moments before. It wasn't that she hadn't seen magic before. Inventors regularly built creations that defied explanation, made even more wondrous by the power of aether. But conjuring fire without the use of a device? That was new to her. She ran onto a bridge back in the direction of home, but froze midway across. Rising almost silently into view were 3 ornate flying rotorotopters beating the air with their spinning rotors, each one with a large lens staring right at her. She still had the canister. She wasn't sure whether she was still eligible for the world's finest courier award at this point. She wondered if there was an award for the worst. And most of all, she wanted badly to run home. But that would lead the whirlers there, directly to her family. The flying spies would report on all her parents' activities, and she was sure Captain Baral would come for them. She wasn't sure what the punishment was for trafficking in aether supplies, but she had heard stories of harsh and painful sentences carried out in the Akra in front of crowds of people. The whirlers dipped and swung through the air toward her, staying just behind her as she fled back across the bridge. It was hard to escape on foot something that flew. The whirlers rose easily over obstacles she had to run around, and she had to keep checking what was directly in front of her. She ducked into narrow alleys and dashed through shops, but the whirlers nimbly curved around to meet her when she came out the other side. She approached a familiar spire, the consul's foundry, the aether-powered factory that mass-produced automatons for the consuls. She was about to circle around it and head deeper into the city when she heard her name.
Chandra?
It was Miss Pashiri, Chandra's contact and a friend of the Nalar family. She was emerging from the main doors of the foundry, a set of keys in her hand.
Miss Bashiri!
Cried Chandra, out of breath.
What's wrong, dear? We weren't supposed to meet here. They're after me!
Chandra said, pointing over her shoulder at the oncoming whirlers. Then she hesitated, remembering her parents' warnings of whom to trust, and eyeing the ring of keys to the consul's foundry. On reflex, her fists tightened. But Miss Pashiri made a loop with her forefinger and thumb, and held them near her forehead, as if she were pushing up a pair of goggles. It matched the signal Chandra's parents had shown her. When Miss Bashiri made the gesture, she made it with reverence, almost a salute.
The Nalars and I go way back, child.
Chandra vacillated. She could hear the whirlers approach. She wanted to trust her contact, this family friend who knew the right gesture. But the set of keys meant some kind of connection to the consuls. The options spun around her. Miss Pashiri's eyes narrowed as she looked past Chandra and saw the whirlers. She turned and unlocked the foundry door again.
Get in here. Go out the back. I'll distract them.
It was the last place Chandra would have chosen to enter. As she debated, Miss Pashiri produced a delicate copper bird from her tunic. The bird came to life, fluttering its feather-etched wings, and launched towards the whirlers. The copper bird collided with one of the whirlers and exploded, sending a shower of pieces down to the street.
Get inside.
said Miss Pishiri with a sharp nod, producing a little bat of silver filigree.
The mechanists aren't in yet. Go, dear. Get to safety.
Chandra ran inside as Miss Pishiri began yelling insults at the whirlers. The interior of the foundry was a still life of silent machinery. Half-assembled automata hung motionless, suspended by their torsos at machinist stations. Legs and grippers stood in racks, waiting for their turn to be riveted together and become another mass-produced servitor. The main overhead lamps were dark, and the only light was from a round glass skylight in the domed ceiling. A huge pylon planted in the center of the space soared up to the top of the dome. Automatic arms and gear-driven manipulators were folded against the pylon like a duck's wings. Chandra crept between the assembly stations and filigreed gears, looking for the other exit. She heard another small explosion outside, and Miss Pishiri's invectives faded into the distance. Chandra heaved a full-chested sigh of gratitude for the distraction. She heard a ticking sound high above. Up on the ceiling, a series of elegant gears turned, and the skylight swiveled open. An unmistakable whisper of rotors heralded the last whirler, which descended through the skylight and found her with its eye. A series of orange lamps flickered on across the foundry ceiling, cascading to life in a spiral pattern. The arms of the pylon stirred, splaying out its surprisingly long limbs and claw-like grippers. All around the foundry floor, artifact creatures unhitched themselves from their mountings and pivoted their heads toward her under the lurid light of the lamps. A surge of heat flooded through her body. Her hands tingled and began to glow.
No, thank you.
She said to her hands.
Not again. No, no, no.
She pushed past one small artifact creature and elbowed another out of the way. She spied the exit, but a huge, six-legged machine stepped in the way of it. She turned back to the entrance, but that way looked even worse. Automata came out of nowhere, striding or shuffling for her. A gear-driven humanoid construct reached out to her. Instead of hands, it had metal shackles, and it reached for her wrists with its fetter claws. She punched it because that was fist logic. But instead of connecting, her fist threw a blast of fire, knocking back the construct and smashing it into scorched pieces on the ground. Another artifact creature crept at her, and she fire-punched it, too, flame erupting out of her at the point of impact. Her hands bloomed with fire again. These were beautiful machines, and she was in no way in control of her fire skill, but there was no time to stop and think. She raged forward with a progression of shouts and blows, scorching her intricate assailants one by one as they surrounded her. She tried to cut her way to the rear exit, but the horde of foundry servitors came at her too fast, and the big, six-legged monstrosity still stood guard at the door. The whirler even had the audacity to swing low, sprout a bladed claw, and nip at her back. She whipped around and yelled at it. Its rotor blades somehow caught fire, and it tilted, collided with the pylon, and fell to the ground in a flaming heap. Chandra remembered that she hadn't actually made the delivery to Miss Pishiri. The canister of aether was still on her back. As she turned back to the door guardian, a very bad idea occurred to her.
Let's see what you can do, Hands.
She said, with her fingers still aflame. She grabbed the satchel off her back and flung the canister at the rear doors. The canister cracked against the multi-legged door guardian and hit the foundry floor, knocking the lid loose. A spurt of aether hissed from the container. Chandra willed all of her fire and fury at the canister. She didn't have time to worry about whether it was the right thing to do. The dark of the underground shanty was cold comfort. When Chandra ran down the stairs, her mother doused a welding wand, and her father raised his goggles. They could see the look on her face and the charred edges of her tunic.
I have to tell you something.
They embraced her. Are you hurt? Are you burned? What happened?
I'm all right.
She said, trembling in their arms.
I made fire.
You set a fire? On the delivery?
No, I made it.
Said Chandra, breaking her parents' embrace.
With my hands. I ran into some consul's soldiers, and I got mad, and my hands caught fire.
Her mother's eyes went wide. She grabbed Chandra's hands in hers and turned them over and back, scanning them.
Were you hurt? Was anybody hurt?
Wait, you encountered Consul's forces?
Nobody got hurt.
Chandra felt a heaviness, a sodden blanket of guilt, at the prospect that someone might have been hurt because of her. Her shoulders fell. A lump welled up in her throat.
I mean, there was... I caused damage at the foundry.
The Consul's foundry?
Ms. Bashiri helped me get in, but I had to get through the door, and I may have destroyed it.
Destroyed the door?
Destroyed the foundry.
Her parents looked at each other. Their mouths opened and closed as if they were trying to say something, but no words came. Finally, her father turned to her. Your hands caught fire, without a device, spontaneously? Chandra's eyes threatened tears, but she smeared them away with her wrist.
Yes.
And your skin did not burn?
My shirt did. Some. Here.
Can you show me?
I don't know if I can do it on command. It came out when I didn't want it to. What's wrong with me? Chandra. Oh, Chandra.
Her mother wrapped her arms around her, squeezing her so that her face pressed against her mother's neck.
I know.
Chandra mumbled. She wanted to reach around her mother, but she kept her hands at her sides. She squeezed a tear into her mother's embroidered shawl.
I'm a freak. Honey, you're not a freak.
Her mother said. She broke the embrace and kept her hands on Chandra's shoulders, looking at her face, her lips pressed together.
You're a pyromancer. If that's what you call someone with matches for hands, then that's me. Listen to me.
Her mother said. Her eyes were intense.
This is a gift. You have something special, something that's not been seen in many years.
Chandra heard this, but the words didn't latch onto anything in her mind. She searched her mother's face for some clue.
I don't understand. Your fire. It's a form of magic, a special kind, but it's something that intimidates them. If it's something you can do without machines, without the need for aether, you do it your own way, you see? And they hate that.
They need the people to need them. And if you don't need them, you become a threat. Chandra balled her fists. How could two little hands cause so much trouble?
Now, Chandra, I have to ask you, did anyone follow you here? I think I blew up everything that could have followed me. And the soldiers you met, did they identify you? They might have. I don't know. But I lost them back by the arena. Father?
Yes?
I'm not ever going to be the world's finest courier, am I?
Her mother pressed her hand against her lips, holding back tears. Her father took Chandra's little hands in his large ones. You are the world's finest, my Chandra. The finest any mother or father could ask for, no matter what happens. Chandra nodded, and her father hugged her, and her mother touched her hand. Somehow, just being herself, just being their daughter, meant so much for them. She wondered what they saw, what being the world's finest Chandra meant. The darkness spoke her name. Chandra. It came at her as if it were muttered through molasses, unreal at first. Her consciousness seized on it, and it dragged her up. Chandra. Her mother's voice was soft, but the hand on her shoulder was firm.
Chandra, let's go, honey. It's time to get up.
Her room was dark, lit only by her parents' handlights. Strangely, the darkness woke her much sooner than morning's light would have. Darkness didn't fit the routine. Darkness meant something was wrong, even more wrong than yesterday. Knapsacks, tool belts, armfuls of possessions.
Where are we going? Grab a bag and follow your father. What's going on?
Her mother pressed a knapsack into Chandra's arms. They climbed the stairs to the heavy segmented door that formed the entrance to their home. Her father rolled the door closed, and her mother welded it shut with a wand. They headed out into the night, their home in their hands, stealing from shadow to shadow. They didn't speak, and Chandra didn't ask questions as they climbed into the back of a waiting wagon and put a blanket over themselves. We hope that you enjoyed the second part of Chandra's origins. We are always working to improve our acting techniques, recording process, and editing process to put out the best video we possibly can. We welcome all possible feedback on what was better or worse within the video. We are also thinking of putting these up in podcast format, but that won't be until all the parts are put up onto YouTube. Part 3 will be a day earlier next week as my wife and I are going on a mini vacation, so there may be no weekend video. But, on that note, exciting news! We will now be putting up one video each weekend, starting this weekend with the Art Seeker's first video on the War of the Spark and the inspirations for the Japanese alternatives. This has been something we have been looking for forever, and we decided to take it upon ourselves. So we will be doing art breakdowns, including some info on the artists who do not get enough recognition, the art, which gets enough recognition but still deserves to be broken down, and the techniques the artists use. We are so incredibly excited for this, and then, after that, next weekend's video will be my Throne of Eldrin predictions, if it goes up. If not, it'll be the weekend after that. These are based solely on the art that was released, and a few comments from Mark. That's it. Locked in before they inevitably release more information before I can get my prediction video out. And then, the weekend after that is my first lore breakdown video, where I will be breaking down the lore of Chandra Nalaar, including how her cards match the story we have been dramatizing, but also the rest of her history as a planeswalker right up to Core 2020's additions to her lore. So many exciting things are coming, and if you made it to this point in the video, then I hope you leave a like and a comment telling us what you would like to see that is lacking in the Magic the Gathering community. Also subscribe so you can see each of these videos as they come out, and as always, seek on.